Khaled Hosseini's two novels, And the Mountains Echoed and The Kite Runner, are set in the late 1990s and early 2000s. They both talk about the Afghanistan war in a way through characters and blunt language that shows the true extent of how devastating the time period was. The Kite Runner is about young boy Amir and his servant Hassan. They are written as very similar characters and best friends, but Hassan is of a lower social standing, and due to culture, he's treated as an inferior. And the Mountain Echoes is told through 9 different perspectives, all going through the war in a different way at a different area, but they are all connected to each other. These are different than typical war stories, however, because they talk about the war through characters' lives and behaviors instead of just talking about the war itself. The devastating environment during this time greatly affects all the characters' lives, and it causes violence, questioning morals, and unstable relationships, but it also brings out a sense of family and redemption in the characters. Khaled Hosseini directly experienced all the effects of the topics in his novels, which is why he's able to write about it with a vivid and engaging story that reminds us of how long his people have been struggling to triumph over the force of violence, according to literary critic Edward Hauer. Hosseini is able to write these stories so well, like Hauer was saying, because he's connected to his characters. So he takes his direct experiences and he changes the story a little bit, but Amir specifically is very based off of his younger self. He had a struggling childhood just like Amir did in The Kite Runner, but he came to America and he became a doctor and wrote on the side, and it helped him with personal growth and overcoming the struggles that he once faced. Amir, at the end of The Kite Runner, says, "When spring comes, it melts the snow. One flake at a time, and maybe I just witnessed the first flake melting." This was after Amir came to America, so this shows his growth as a character, which was directly influenced by Hosseini's. And so Hosseini writes characters like this to try to encourage other people to view Afghanistan culture through different lenses and to try to give Afghans a sense of hope. However, after 9/11, he stopped writing. And this was really important to these stories because he wasn't going to write Kite Runner after this because of all the prejudice and discrimination in America. But his wife said that that was exactly why he should continue writing. She said that he could maybe show a different face of Afghanistan. And so here you can kind of see that even in his own story, not even his novel, his environment brought forth violence towards himself in the sense of discrimination and prejudice. But he was able to overcome this in a sense of redemption and personal growth, and it allowed for people to have hope and give him a second chance maybe as well. So The Kite Runner is Khaled Hosseini's most autobiographical book, as he based Amir heavily off of himself. As I was talking about before, they both had a lot of struggles during his childhood. Amir's mother died in childbirth, so he always felt this kind of guilt. But it was really because of the environment, because of how impoverished, not really impoverished, but disadvantaged his environment was, because they didn't have the proper medicine to prevent a death like that. But since his mom died like that, he was always felt really guilty, and his father, Baba, was a war hero and a leader in Afghanistan, Kabul specifically, where they lived. And so his mannerisms were that of a leader. He was very kind of cold and not affectionate, at least to Amir. So it made him think, he said, "The truth of it was I always felt like Baba hated me a little, and why not, after I had killed his beloved wife." So because of his environment and where he was born into, he had this internal struggle ever since he was young, and it overcame him with guilt. So he acted out to try to get his father to love him. So this kind of showed how an environmental factor leads to strengthening of a family relationship. Even though it didn't really strengthen the relationship yet, it showed him that he really wanted to have a good relationship with his dad. So the disconnect between Amir and his father is clear through the character Hassan, who I was talking about before is the servant. He's the same age as Amir, and they were best friends, but he was more similar to Baba. He had the kind of mannerisms and politeness that he had, so Baba kind of showed Hazan more love and affection than he showed Amir. This made Amir, like, really jealous. And so Ting Wen examines Amir in a lit crit, using Freud's theory of the id, superego, and ego. So the id is what controls desire. So it's what controls impulsiveness. Well, not control. It is your impulsiveness. It's what you desire. It's chaos. And so Wen says, under such circumstance, the id drives Amir to hate Hazan and desire more parental love. So Amir doesn't really think through his actions. He just goes off of impulse. He doesn't like Hazan because his father likes him more, or at least seems like he likes him more. So he impulsively does this act of betrayal. So a kite runner in this culture is they fly kites with glass strings, and they try to break the other kites, and then one person will run after the fallen kites. So Hazan was running after a fallen kite, got trapped in an alley with this guy, Aset, who raped him and abused him, and Amir watched and then ran away and didn't do anything to help him. And so this was an act of ultimate betrayal because Hazan had supported Amir his entire life and always been there for him. But his desire to be loved and his impulse drove Amir to run away from the scene. So this shows how a destructive environment that he was born into creates unstable relationships, as he betrayed his best friend. But Wen argues that in the novel that kites symbolize the purity of human nature. The reason why Hazan is able to catch a kite every time is because he possesses the purest quality of human beings. This connects him to a superego, which is the complete opposite of an id. It obeys, it wants to follow directions, that's its desire. And the superego will balance out the id eventually as the child grows, according to Freud. So Baba is also seen as a superego because he is the same kind of leader. And both of these people, Baba and Hazan, are really important in Amir's personal growth. So this shows the importance of redemption and family because this is what drives Amir to want redemption. He realizes the fault in his actions after he goes to America. He has kind of a moral clarity. He says, before he goes to America, he said, maybe Hazan was the price I had to pay, the lamb I had to slay to win Baba. Was it a fair price? The answer floated in my conscious mind. He was just a Hazara, wasn't he? Which Hazara is the lower social class he was from, treated as inferiors. So here, though, you can see Amir's initial growth because he's starting to question traditions, which is hard when you've grown up with traditions being told a certain aspect of your personality, how you treat other people, is acceptable. So he's starting to question it through the superego. That's what drives him to be a better person, and we see this after he goes to America and has this kind of like moral like clarity. He goes back to Afghanistan to go find Hazan, and Hazan was dead, but he did find his son Sarab, and he adopted him. So that adoption breaks the cycle of abuse and discrimination because it shows that he's not focusing on class, he's not focusing on tradition, he's changed his morals, and he's focusing on family. So this shows how the violence that he dealt with, both internally and physically, from being in Afghanistan, created his unstable relationships, but because of that, it allowed him to question his morals, and he realized that family and redemption were a lot more worthy. So Loyal Miles, he's another literary critic. He argued that the tension in Amir's relationships with other characters in The Kite Runner roughly mirrors Afghanistan's struggle in the 1970s to maintain a traditional sense of national identity in the face of a government instability and eventual invasion by a foreign power. This shows how war really caused discrimination between people, and how the environment created this. So war and the environment itself created the discrimination, prejudice, violence, all of that against other people. This is parallel to the characters because this type of war was really bad when he was in Afghanistan, and that's when he had all those negative relationships. But then Amir says that history isn't easy to overcome, neither is religion. In the end, I was a passionate Hazan, and Hazan was a Hazara. Nothing was ever going to change that. So this is directly comes from that, where it's like the war is really bad. But then he says, right after he comes back from America, back to Afghanistan to find Hazan, he says, what was so funny that for the first time since the winter of 1975, I felt at peace. Winter of 1975 was when he betrayed Hazan. So this really shows his personal growth and how the environment influenced it. He was in an unstable environment, and the conflict was so bad, directly mirrored in his actions. As soon as he left, he got a sense of moral clarity, wanted redemption, figured out what he was doing was wrong, acted not on impulse, came back, felt at peace, and was able to break the cycle. So for the next novel, they have very similar themes or ideas. So it again focuses on family, focuses on redemption and everything, but also there's this main idea that the past is always going to be a part of you, which does show up in The Kite Runner as well, but it's really, there's a lot of it in this book as well to kind of contribute to that sense of family. So, And the Mountain Echo immediately begins with mention of Afghanistan culture. So Savdor, one of the main characters, he has two children, Pari and Abdullah, and he starts by telling them a folk tale about a div. So the div comes to this house and says, I need one of your kids. You need to sacrifice one of your kids to me. And they have to give him a kid, and they give him this kid named Quayas. Div takes him. The dad feels so ransacked with guilt, he goes after the div, and even though he knew he was probably going to die. So this showed a sense of family, and it was kind of like the guilt redemption kind of thing, because the environment he lived in was so impoverished that he couldn't help care for the kid. So the div took him, and when the dad came, he found that the child actually was in paradise. The div had made him forget about his family, and he's playing with all these other children, had everything he needed. And so the div gave him a choice. He said, you can take him back to where he was barely surviving, or you can leave him here with me where he is cared for and happy. And R.C. Lutz says, Hosseini dramatizes the time-honored tradition of people using a folktale to convey a deeper moral message. And this is really true, because this is carried through the whole novel, this specific story, where the environment causes a sacrifice to be made. So this really brought forth the idea of family, and the div says to the dad, cruelty and benevolence are but shades of the same color, which holds true, because the dad thought that the div was awful, taking the son from him, but in reality the div was just offering him a better life. The dad chooses to let the son stay there, which is a true act of selflessness, and as a reward the div makes him forget about the son. So here we can see the dad, like Amir did, questioning his morals and viewing morality from a different outside point of view. So at the end of the story, the Savdor tells his children that every once in a while, Quayas' father thought that he heard another noise, the high-pitched jingle of a bell. And Quayas had always worn a bell around his neck. So this just shows how the past was always a part of them, and that family bonds are unbreakable, because he was away, and the father technically had forgotten about him, but they were still connected. So Pari and Abdullah, his children, helped to carry the idea of unbreakable family bonds that their father taught them throughout the rest of the novel. As a child, Pari was adopted by a really wealthy lady, Neela Wadadi, and Abdullah was older than Pari, so he understood what was going on and he was really upset. But Neela told him it was for the best, which he didn't understand. But it's the same concept of the div. She was given more opportunity. She was able to live comfortably because Savdor and his family were very poor as well. So they were poor because of the war, which shows how that had a really negative effect and mimicked the characters' lives, because their environment was so bad that their lives turned so bad they had to make really hard decisions. The dad had to question his morals like the dad in the story and give his child up so that she could have a better life. The only difference was, the main difference between those two stories, is that Quaya's dad was able to forget. So Abdullah had to live with that, like, not guilt because he didn't give her up, but just like emptiness and loneliness in his life. And he said, or he didn't say it, literary critics at Gale Resource Centers, they said that memories are a curse, something that makes you relive the most painful parts of your life, the toil, the struggle, and the sorrows. And this is the scene when Abdullah says, there was no forgetting. Puri hovered unbidden at the edge of Abdullah's vision everywhere he went. And this is again the idea that family bonds are unbreakable. They'll always be there. And even Puri, who was so little she forgot, later in the novel was like, I feel like I'm missing something. She always knew that she was missing something. And it just shows how the past is always a part of them. But due to this unstable environment, their relationships change. So this question of the morals and the importance of family really correlates to the original folktale that was told in the very beginning of the novel. So just like in The Kite Runner, the idea of redemption shines through in And the Mountain Echoed. So Puri and Abdullah were torn apart when the war was really extreme. That's when she was given away. And Abdullah suffered, and the other characters in the novel suffered from this too. Their lives were getting worse. But the war gets better. Puri finds Abdullah again, and they get together, and there's kind of like a sense of peace in the novel now. So this again mimics the environment. However, a literary criticism says Puri and Abdullah are the emotional heart of the novel, and once Hosseini reunites brother and sister, the novel comes to a skillful handed resolution whose chaos will resonate with readers long after the tale is finished. So this just kind of showed again how important their lives were. So this is connected to The Kite Runner because Puri is like Amir here. She searches for her brother. She finally finds Abdullah. And although he's alive, like Hazan wasn't alive, he's alive, but he has dementia. So he forgets everything. He forgets all about her, which connects him to to Quaya's father from the folktale. So here, though, although you think that the family bond is broken, at the end it's revealed that it's not, because she found a box with her name on it in Abdullah's room, and she said it was stuffed with feathers of all colors. She collected feathers as a kid, which means Abdullah kept all these feathers to remember her by all these years. This is a different redemption than Amir had, but it is still a redemption nonetheless, because they were united and they became a family again. Even though it was different, it brought them peace and it brought them happiness, and it kind of made up for the guilt and loneliness that they felt the rest of their lives. So this again shows how the really unfortunate times that they faced in their youth due to war reflected directly into their lives, and how they overcame it and became more growth as a person, had redemption. They realized the importance of family, but that wouldn't have happened without the war. That wouldn't have happened without the father questioning his morals. So though these two novels are very different structures, they have different characters, and they're different stories, they talk about the same kind of struggles and the different parts of cultures that influence these struggles. So the main thing is that the war parallels the events in each character's lives, and so how this is a very atypical war story because it doesn't just tell about the war, it tells about the war through characters, just like a real person would experience it, which kind of is more realistic and more true. So it shows how the disadvantaged environments lead to these kind of struggles, and just like how when Amir went to America and he had such a better life, it shows how a different perspective just kind of shines in. So it urges readers to really reevaluate their own morals and maybe reevaluate how they're viewing people in these really tough situations, the choices they make. Like giving up your kid, somebody might think, wow, that's an awful choice, but if you read a book like this, you understand how it has to be. So that's kind of Hosseini's purpose in writing these two novels, was to show a justification and explanation, and to also have other people maybe experience a culture in a way that they never have before.